suppose heifer rearing really is an investment. The cost of heifer rearing is actually the second biggest cost on the farm, so second only to feed cost. And I suppose you pay all this money to rear the heifers and you don't start to see a return on investment until about 1.63 lactations.
Heifer rearing is a key element of dairy farming. However, when the pressure comes on for feed availability, as it has in recent years, young stock often get tightened up to facilitate the milking herd. This can have knock-on consequences if calves and heifers don't make their weight targets. Today I'm joined by Hazel Costigan, a researcher at Moorepark, who completed a PhD on this subject a few years ago, and I started by asking Hazel to outline the costs associated with heifer rearing.
I suppose heifer rearing really is an investment. It costs €1,545 to rear a heifer from birth until they calve down at 24 months. And I suppose this study was done by Laurence Shalloo in 2014, so it's a while ago now. So that cost has likely gone up. And I suppose you pay all this money to rear the heifers and you don't start to see a return on investment until about 1.63 lactations. And I suppose, once again, that figure is from a study by Donagh Berry in 2015. So it's likely, I suppose, that the length of time taken to recoup these costs has also gone up, given the rising cost of input prices lately.
So Hazel, the cost of rearing the heifer then, we'll say you've mentioned it there at the 1,545. I suppose, do farmers often realise that cost is as big as it is, maybe in that it's not a check that they actually write? Unless they actually go out and buy heifers, they don't incur the cost of rearing the heifer as such in a physical form of paying for them.
Yeah, exactly. So I suppose the cost of heifer rearing is actually the second biggest cost on the farm, so second only to feed cost. And because, I suppose, yeah, as you said, the farmer doesn't go out and buy the heifers, they often mightn't realise the cost or the money it takes to rear those heifers. So I suppose it's important to rear those heifers well, to be getting good average daily gains, to be meeting target weights, so that you can get a good return on investment, so that they calve down at the right age, and that they can start producing milk and, I suppose, paying off the cost it takes to rear them.
Yeah, so I suppose just to go back to what you said about Donagh's study and the 1.63 lactation. So effectively, they're into the final third of their second lactation before they've actually started to generate return for you. Exactly.
And I suppose that's assuming that the heifers actually calve down in the first place, and I suppose calve down again in the second lactation. So there was a study from the UK that said 24% of heifers actually don't make the second lactation. So straight away, those animals aren't, I suppose, you're losing money on those animals. They're not paying for themselves because they haven't calved down a second time.
Yeah, okay. So I suppose coming back to the key points, I suppose then, Hazel, from birth through to calving down, they need to be performing at a high level all the way through. I suppose the calf piece is behind us now, and we would have talked about it in the springtime about making sure that calves are weaned at the right weights and so forth. But talk to me about what you were doing, we'll say, while you were monitoring the stock. What were you doing in terms of trying to make sure that stock were hitting their target weights, or what's the protocol that's employed here in the farms in Moorepark in relation to trying to make sure that heifers are on target weights prior to housing, I suppose, obviously being the key thing at the moment, coming ahead in maybe a month or 6 weeks, depending on farm locations and so forth?
Yeah, so I suppose, like anything, you can't manage what you don't measure. So I suppose in Moorepark there's a big focus on weighing the heifers, and depending on whether or not there's trials going on, we would have weighed them between twice a month and once a month throughout the rearing period, maybe twice a month in the first grazing season and once a month then the second grazing season. So I suppose if we're weighing them that often, it's easy to keep on top of the animals. If there's animals that are behind target, we can pull them out and we can give them extra concentrate or give them access to better grass. So I suppose that's what we're doing in Moorepark, but I suppose it's easy for us to say that. The facilities are very good. And I suppose I recognise that weighing heifers and calves is a tedious task, and it's very time consuming. So I suppose even if we could get farmers to weigh animals a couple of times a year at key times, such as maybe coming up to housing or at turnout, to make sure that they have their animals right for breeding season. So that at the minute, I suppose in the literature, the big targets are that the animals should be between 30, 60 and 90% of mature body weight at 6, 15 and 24 months respectively. And I suppose those targets were created in indoor housing systems. So I suppose in those systems, the animals would be inside for the whole rearing period. They would have access to a TMR or total mixed ration of consistently good quality, so that their, I suppose, growth rate would be kind of linear throughout the rearing period. I suppose it's different in pasture-based systems because grass quality varies from week to week. And then we have the animals being housed for a couple of months in the winter period where they go inside and they're on silage. Silage wouldn't be as good quality as grass. So the animals can often, I suppose, plateau or go back in weight even. So the average daily gain, I suppose, or the growth of pasture-based heifers would be different to that of the animals reared in the indoor systems. And I suppose if we were to just tell farmers to follow those three targets of 30, 60, 90% at 6, 15 and 24 months, it's too late, I suppose, for us to get to 15 months of age, which is a key time. So the animals have to, I suppose, the breeding season starts and we need to get all the animals in calf in a relatively short space of time. So if we just weigh our animals at 15 months of age and find out at that point that they're behind target, it's too late to do anything about it. So I suppose if we could get farmers to maybe weigh animals around now, just to, I suppose they could divide out any of the animals that are behind target, maybe give them extra concentrate or access to better grass, or if the animals or if the farmer has the, I suppose, capacity to separate the animals in the shed during the winter, they could give the lighter animals maybe better quality silage. And I suppose a couple of things like that would help to improve the weight of the animals leading into the breeding season.
Okay, so Hazel, you mentioned earlier about the financial cost of them not being reared well, but what are the actual implications of them not being reared well? So you've mentioned having them right for breeding. Weight doesn't necessarily mean that they won't go on calf. No, it does. It doesn't help, but they can often go on calf and still be behind target all the way through the second season, and as they calve down as heifers as well. So where are the impacts actually really being felt in terms of the weight, lack of weight, we'll say?
Well, I suppose there is a link in some of the literature between weight and whether the animal has, I suppose, started cycling. So whether they've achieved puberty. So, and then I think they'd need a couple of cycles before it would be regular enough for them to actually go and calf. So there is definitely a link between weight and whether the animal has started cycling or not. And ideally, you'd want that to happen in the run up to the breeding season. And I suppose then there's also a lot of studies done on the weight of the animal at calving, and that can have like big implications in terms of their production thereafter. So I did a study with Donagh Berry on, we looked at 15 years of data from Teagasc farms from 2003 to 2017, and we found that there was a big link between the weight at calving and their production in the first three parities. So the heavier animals at calving produced more milk and milk solids in parity 1, 2 and 3. So there is strong links there between the weight of the animals, even at calving, and their production afterwards.
Yeah, so that's interesting because it can often come across people that will be complaining about the performance of first lactation animals in particular, and it's often when you look at them that they're light framed looking. So it's obviously they haven't hit the target on the way up. I suppose you mentioned there about the heavier heifers doing better as well, but is there a risk that you could overdo heifers too?
Yeah, I suppose there has been some research to show that if the animals are too heavy, I suppose particularly coming up to calving, that they can have increased risk of calving difficulty and dystocia. So I suppose it would be important not to have them too heavy, but I suppose in most of the research that we've seen, that's not the case, that generally animals will be, I suppose, either at or behind target.
Yeah, so generally speaking, when people do weigh them, they should be looking for as you said, the 30%, we'll say, for the 6-month-old animals now at this stage, to be in or around that target. Fair, like you don't want in a group of maybe 10 or 15 or 20 heifers that there's a huge range from very light to very heavy, but on average we're okay. Like
exactly. And with, I suppose, another thing just to mention with that target of 30, 60, 90% of mature body weight, I suppose the big thing with that is how do you actually determine the mature body weight of your herd. So in the literature, it says that you should weigh a proportion of third, fourth and fifth lactation animals in May and June when there's no effect of pregnancy on body weight. And that would kind of give you a good picture of the mature weight of your herd. Now, I know farmers probably aren't weighing their cows regularly, so they mightn't be able to, I suppose, determine the mature weight of their herd that way. But there's also possible to determine the mature weight of your herd from looking at the maintenance requirement or the maintenance sub-index of your herd. So George Ramsbottom has a very good tool. It's an Excel tool that you can enter the maintenance sub-index of your herd, which you can find that on your ICBF account, and you can put that into an Excel tool, and that will give you, I suppose, a predicted mature body weight of your herd. So I suppose that's another handy tool for farmers to be able to use if in the absence of having actually weighed their animals.
Yeah, and actually ICBF have done a large number of weighings this year as well now to try to even make the maintenance sub-index more robust, but it is actually very a strong indicator of herd size, so it's just going to make that more robust. So that's a very good point, Hazel, that people don't actually have to necessarily weigh them. If they just look at the maintenance sub-index and their EBI report, they'll be able to get the idea of where they should be pitching at anyway. So Hazel, you said about maybe weighing them now to get a rough idea where they're at and maybe moving stock around within groups and so forth. But would it be important, given the way we're moving into October now, heavy rain there over the weekend, maybe a drop in consistency of the diet, maybe dropping the quality of the diet as well? So is it going to be important to monitor? Like, okay, weighing them today is grand, but like if you don't weigh them again until next spring, you won't really know a whole lot about them. So would it be advised that they should be weighed again before housing?
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. So we weighed the heifers on the Dairy Gold farm last week, and they were about 200 kilos. And they should be weighed again, I suppose, in the next couple of weeks, and definitely before housing. So if you were to house them on the 1st of November, they should probably be around 220 kilos. And I suppose now is the time to make those changes. So if you were able to pull out the lighter animals, you could give them extra concentrate or maybe give them better quality grass, because grass is a superior feed to silage. So it's important to get it right now, I suppose, before they go into the shed, because they won't do as well on the silage as they will now on the grass.
To take it on the next step then, there's a chance that these light heifers do actually go in calf sometimes. And all you said is right, 100% in terms of cyclicity and so forth, but that they're just, they do achieve puberty. They are able to go in calf. They go in calf, but they're behind schedule in terms of weight. So we're maybe, what are we, 4 or 5 months away, maybe depending, from calving for some of those animals. Should they be separated out and given preferential treatment now again at this stage?
I suppose, Stuart, based on what I said there about I suppose, heavier heifers at calving having better production there for the first 3 lactations, that would definitely be beneficial to, I know if there was any calf or heifers, in-calf heifers that were lighter, if they could be, I suppose, given better quality silage during the winter, or even at this stage, they could be given better grass, or they could be given some concentrate just to kind of get them to calve down at heavier weights, because that will benefit their performance then in the milking herd.
And again, I suppose people always get worried about the blowing the calf, and you did mention it there earlier about dystocia and so forth. So like it's better to be acting now rather than waiting until close to calving, when obviously a lot of the concentrate that you would feed would probably just go into kind of maintaining the animal nearly as much as anything else.
Definitely, yeah.
I suppose long and short of it, so Hazel, is huge cost associated with it. Was it 20 or 25% you said it was?
20% of the total cost on the farm. Yeah.
So it's quite a significant cost, but it's a hidden cost because, as I said, farmers never write a check for it as such. It's only maybe farmers that are buying in heifers on an ongoing basis that know the cost of the heifer, or maybe the farmers that are contract rearing their heifers see the cost associated with them. But it's really driven by weight and hitting those targets all the way through the year. So the long and the short of it is to measure them, weigh them obviously, and move them around, try to get them up to scratch basically, especially before housing, because actually you had a figure there earlier as well, like the level of performance on a daily basis on grass and the level of performance on silage are 2 very different ones. And those light stock could actually go backwards in the shed during the winter, could they? Or, well, sorry, they go backwards relative to the other stock really, rather than losing weight like.
Yeah, exactly. So there was a figure there for a 70% DMD silage. If the heifers are on the silage only diet, they might be only putting on about 0.3 kilos a day. Whereas if you introduced a bit of concentrate to that, they could put on up to 0.5 kilos a day. So it's still, that's kind of what you're looking at over the winter period. And I suppose you'd want to be putting on maybe 0.7 kilos a day on average throughout the rearing period. So they are going to go back a bit during the housing. So it's important, I suppose, to get them right coming up to housing.
Yeah, so it emphasises the importance of silage quality for those young stock and for the in-calf heifers as well, obviously, in order to keep moving forward as well. So look, Hazel, I think you've given us a good summation there of the things that people need to be doing in the short term, the cost that's associated with it. So we'll wrap it up at that, and thanks for joining us on this week's show.
Perfect, thank you.
That's all for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast, and my thanks to Hazel Costigan for joining us on this week's show. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify, and for more information go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Stuart Childs, and join us next time for your Dairy Edge.